Good Monday morning, Dog Nation. I'm happy to report that my name's Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. What I'm truly happy to report is that the Deep South's oldest rivalry is in possession of UGA once again here after 27-10 win on Saturday. As you might imagine, we'll talk a lot about that on our program today. We'll say hello to Chip Towers in just a moment. He'll give us some of his thoughts on it as well. I'll give you some of the audio from what Kirby Smart had to say, and we'll figure out, at least over the course of the next couple of weeks, where Georgia goes from here as it gets ready to take on Alabama in the SEC championship game coming up on December 1st. Couple regular season games to take care of before we get there, though. So we're going to have a good time here over the course of the next couple of weeks, and a great time today as we kind of have some fun at the expense of Auburn after they took it on the chin pretty hard in Athens on Saturday. So we're glad you're with us as DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, begins right now.
From DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I'm going to be an old man here for a minute. I think you have to be, of a certain age to really appreciate the significance of what happened on Saturday and what has been happening for Georgia against Auburn for quite some time. The stat really that jumps off the page is that Georgia has now won 11 of its last 14 meetings against Auburn. I just find that to be fascinating because I am a child that came of age during the 80s. And I've told you this before that, I have a vague memory of having seen Herschel Walker play, but I didn't, grow up in the Herschel Walker era. I saw Herschel play, but I was almost too young to even know who George was playing or really even know, the rules of the game necessarily. I became a college football fan in kind of that period of mid-'80s on, and at that time, Auburn was a grizzly bear to deal with. And this Georgia-Auburn rivalry was really known for being razor thin. The two programs had almost the exact same number of wins against each other. And really, at one point in time, it was even more than that. They almost had scored the exact same total number of points against each other. Georgia-Auburn, just for a long time, was as close can get when it comes to a rivalry. So to think that Georgia has won again, now Kirby Smart 3-1 all-time against Gus Malzahn in just 3 years on the job, to think that that's the story here for Georgia, that it has totally dominated Auburn. Auburn hasn't scored in the second half against Georgia. I don't even know the number. It's some crazy thing of how long it's been since Auburn scored in the, even beyond the first quarter against Georgia. It's just total domination for the rivalry. So obviously there's a lot of nuts and bolts to dive into and get into about what happened on Saturday and what it could mean for Georgia the rest of the way as it attempts to make another return to the college football playoff. But I do think it's important here off the top just to speak to how much Georgia has taken over the Deep South's oldest rivalry. And I hesitate to make this comparison because I don't like admitting this is even a true thing that existed. But you remember how Florida used to have total control of the cocktail party rivalry with Georgia that had won year after year after year and had this terrible ratio of wins in comparison to Georgia? Well, as bad as that was for Georgia to experience when it was going on, that's exactly what Georgia right now is doing to Auburn. That's quite a thing to behold, and it was great to see Gus Malzahn and so many of the Auburn players in a bad mood on Saturday night. And with that said, let's turn to, I guess, what the source of the irritation is for Auburn coming off of this. The fact that Georgia, with that 27-10 lead late in the fourth quarter, attempts a fake field goal. Rodrigo Blankenship tries to throw it to Isaac Nada. If I've got my stat correct on this, Georgia has now attempted as many fake field goals in the last 4 games as Justin Fields has passes, which is sort of a strange thing to be true, but nonetheless, Georgia does try that. It does not end up leading to the touchdown. Nada was open, maybe overthrown just a little bit by Rodrigo Blankenship, which is kind of a funny sentence to even be saying here on DawgNation Daily. But that made Auburn mad. They were upset about that on Saturday night, not happy about that whatsoever. Deshaun Davis is an Auburn linebacker. He spoke to reporters after the game, and he was quoted in a number of outlets as saying this. If you're watching, I'll show you this on the screen. He says, I mean, sometimes karma handles the thing that you can. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I guess I get the gist of it. He says, I mean, that's how they want to be remembered. He means Georgia. That's what they want to be known for. Then it was, in the words of Gus Malzahn, a bullcrap call. So I guess we've gone from dog crap a year ago to bullcrap this year. I don't know if that's an upgrade or a downgrade or a what. Deshaun Davis goes on to say, we shouldn't be in that situation. I'll just say that. I'll revert back to the positives and revert back to us. If we're not down 17 points, then maybe we don't see that play. But y'all know the answer to that. Once again, that's Auburn linebacker Deshaun Davis in the locker room post-game talking about the decision by Georgia to fake a field goal that doesn't end up working, but would have been icing on the cake for many Georgia fans, and at that point would have turned into a blowout victory. Georgia, of course, does cover the 14-point spread. Now, Deshaun Davis says that Gus Malzahn told them apparently that it was a bullcrap call. When Malzahn had a chance to speak publicly about it, he didn't quite have that much to say. In fact, he didn't want to talk about it at all. Here is Malzahn post-game being questioned about the fake field goal and not really giving much of an answer. Here's Malzahn.
What are your thoughts on Georgia faking the field goal when they were up 17 and the game was in hand?
They coach their team and we coach ours. I don't have any comment on that.
Ooh, Malzahn, are you little mad or big mad when it comes to the fake field goal? It's a little bit hard to tell on that. I guess it should be pointed out that Kirby Smart, to be fair here, has a very different description. You almost get the sense that Deshaun Davis, Malzahn, maybe others connected to Auburn. I guess there was also some reports that the radio broadcast for Auburn was none too happy about the fake field goal attempt. Maybe they feel like that was an attempt on the part of Georgia to rub, the score in Malzahn's face, maybe hearkening back to the dog crap stuff after the game last season. Kirby Smart, though, says it's all about the strategy. Here's Kirby.
Why the fake field goal in the last few minutes?
Why not?
Because you had a comfortable lead.
Comfortable? What was comfortable? 17? 17 plus 3 is what? 20? And 20 is a what? 3-score game you lose, right? So if the point differential is 3 scores, what good does a field goal do you? Doesn't make it anymore. So if they don't get it, they're backed up, right? So the thought was they're going to take 3 touchdowns to beat us if we get that. If we don't, 3 touchdowns is going to beat us right away. So it's all about point differential and decisions, and we wanted them to have to start backed up. So it was something that was well thought out long before it happened. It was talked about during the drive.
I mean, guys, come on. It's football 101. It's all about point differential. Kirby has a way of, giving emphatic answers that sound exactly right, but then when you really listen to the text, you're like, I'm not sure that really means what he thinks it means. Either way, I don't really care. I'm not scandalized by any of this. If Kirby Smart showed his true feelings for Gus Malzahn, that he doesn't like Malzahn, doesn't like Auburn, if he was trying to rub their face in it, get a little bit of a victory cigar with the highlight moment for Rodrigo Blankenship, I'm not scandalized by that. These are what rivalry games are supposed to be. The two sides are not supposed to like each other. And I guess from the Auburn standpoint, Malzahn having some fun on the field at Georgia's expense last year is also part of that as well. Their side liked that. The Georgia side didn't. The Georgia side kind of likes the happy mood around DawgNation right now. The Auburn side's vying for revenge. I'm sure Malzahn in a couple years will get his revenge by saying bad things about Georgia when he's working as a TV analyst. But, I mean, that's kind of the way, things go down in rivalry games. You have the back-and-forth stuff, and, both sides, sort of feel the moral high ground to sort of say and do what they want to the other side, and on we go in the annals of the SEC. This was just another chapter in that on a Saturday night. And from the standpoint of a Georgia fan, the fact that Kirby Smart maybe, even though his description would be different, feels a little extra motivation against Auburn and Gus Malzahn, to most Georgia fans, that's going to be considered a very good thing. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Hello to you. Thanks for being with us, no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter feed, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or in podcast form, wherever podcasts can be found. We are just glad that you have joined us here on the program today, and really appreciate Marco's Pizza for making it all possible. And you know that Marco's Pizza is the MVP of Primo Pizza. It's stove-made fresh daily with original sauce and a recipe and 3 signature cheeses that make every bite magnifico. You can order yours today right now from Marcos.com. Really appreciate Marcos being a part of the program. Looking forward to having Chip Towers being a part of the program a little bit later on as well. We'll get Chip's thought on the fake field goal, Kirby Smart's description of it, and I guess this extra chapter and this extra layer of dislike maybe added to the Georgia-Auburn rivalry here. That's the way that things go in the SEC. I'm sure Chip will have plenty of interesting things to say about that coming up as well. Before we talk to Chip, though, let's also go around the doghouse here on this Monday on a DawgNation Daily, brought to you by our friends at Pella Window Door. And I want to get more deeply into some of the other things that happened on the game. And it's going to take us a couple days to really get into everything that emerges here. Obviously, it's a great day for DeAndre Swift. We'll talk about DeAndre Swift later on in the program. I'm going to save that for later. And over the course of the next couple days, as I said, there's all kinds of storylines that you'll have to break down from what goes on here. But there are 2 things right now I want to get into that were also, I thought, crucial for Saturday. Justin Fields plays a lot. We'll talk about Fields in a second. Let me also talk about the terrific touchdown to end the first half, as on fourth down, Georgia goes for it in a fourth and short situation, about 25 seconds on the clock, and Jake Fromm finds Terry Godwin for what turned into a thrilling touchdown moment. And as a fan, I love this. I love the bold move by Kirby Smart and Jim Chaney. It's a high-risk, high-reward situation. You get the touchdown, it looks great, as Kirby Smart's going to explain to us in a moment. If it doesn't work, though, you get Auburn in business to maybe take some time to go down there and try to score on their own. It's the kinds of ways, though, that you win rivalry games, especially against good teams. And even though they have a bad record, I still think of Auburn as being a quality opponent. The way that you really put that game away in the second half is by deflating any hope they may have at the end of the first half as well. And Kirby Smart was asked after the game was over, what went into deciding to do for that? What went into being as aggressive right there as you were? Going forward on a fourth down situation, not trying what would have been a 55-yard field goal with really no win to speak of for Blankenship, even though it was a cold night. And Kirby went into detail about what they were thinking leading up to one of the most thrilling plays of the season for Georgia.
We try every week to go look at scenarios across the country, and there were about 4 scenarios last week where teams mismanaged the clock and ran it down and tried to kick a field goal, and we felt like we could milk the clock, and if we went for it, we were going to kick a field goal, and if we didn't, they wouldn't have much time left. So we were trying to kind of put them in a vice. It's hard over there on the other sideline going, do I call timeout and give them more time, or do I let them milk it? And, if you don't convert that, they've got a shot at a field goal. So you got to have confidence in your players. You got to show confidence in your offense. And I felt like at that time we needed to score points. And I was looking to get a field goal, but we had a big play. Terry did a tremendous job. It was a great route.
This may be the wrong description, but with it being empty backfield the way that it was, Georgia having these, 4 receivers spread out wide, it almost looked to me like a basketball play, the way you see the Golden State Warriors from time to time, just sort of spread everybody out and, kind of get that isolation matchup they want, and, somebody goes to the basket and makes a move. That's what this really looked like to me. It looked like Georgia spread out the Auburn defense, picked the guy that it wanted to exploit, and it turns into a great touchdown and a terrific job by Godwin, putting his body in position to make the catch, then making the catch and running past everyone for a touchdown. And it's also worth pointing out that when it comes to the bold move here for Georgia to go for it all there near the end of the first half, the guy that Kirby wants to give some credit to is a guy that's been maligned some by Georgia fans. It's offensive coordinator Jim Chaney. Here's more from Kirby.
Well, Jim makes that call. He makes a decision based on what they're going to be in. We're looking for matchups, which everybody in college football is looking for. There's no genius to it. It was a good call, a good throw, a good route, good catch. They were trying to stop us. If they stop us there, they may get points. So they were in an aggressive call as well. It's
an ironic moment because, as I said, Chaney's gotten his share of criticism. The Georgia offense has at least generated its share of head scratches on the part of many of its fans because it has had so many issues down near the goal line, and believe you me, we'll get into that over the course of the day and over the course of the week. But this is a moment, though, where the Georgia offense really does get it done. It makes a bold play call. It executes it perfectly, and it was one of the reasons why Auburn essentially had no hope of winning this game on Saturday night. Auburn had fought Georgia a bit in the first half, but by the end of the half, the hopes were deflated. And it's a great job by the Georgia offense, Jake Fromm, Terry Godwin including, for making that happen. Something else that's worth talking about here in the midst of what was a very easy Georgia win, at least by the time you got into the second half, we saw a lot of Justin Fields, and maybe it wasn't, necessarily what a lot of fans were hoping to see from Justin Fields. Obviously, there's a pocket of fans who say, if you just give this young man a chance, he's going to prove himself to be the starting quarterback. And then there's the overwhelming majority of Georgia fans which say it's great to have this extra option at quarterback, that Georgia benefits from having 2 good quarterbacks. And we got a chance to see on Saturday a little bit of a deeper look at where Fields' game is at the moment. There were some nice moments. There were also a couple of issues. He takes a sack at one point in time, at a time when you really can't take a sack there. But I think overall, the entire story for Fields just adds up to be, as Kirby Smart describes, some much-needed in-game learning opportunities that are eventually going to make Justin Fields a much better quarterback. Fields was a key contributor for Georgia on Saturday, and here's what Kirby Smart had to say about him.
It'll be tremendous. It's on-the-job training. We wanted to grow the kid, let him play with confidence, let him go out and play, and he did some good things, man. He did some good things in the game. He changed a couple runs that were really good, and he managed the game well up until the shot clock and then the sack, and he knew it. He knew it right around me. He said, "My bad, I messed it up," and he'll grow from that. It's the best way to do is learn. First and goal on the goal line, you got 2 more downs.
Yeah, I'm glad to see Fields get some playing time. And even if the moments that he got on the field on Saturday weren't all perfect moments for him, I think ultimately, as Kirby says, he is going to be better for that opportunity, and Georgia's going to be better for it as well. Georgia needs both these quarterbacks. As you know, Georgia's got a grizzly bear to deal with here at the end of the season, or at least at the at the end of the regular season, first Saturday in December against Alabama. I would never pretend that Justin Fields is going to come in that game and do some sort of Tua Tagovailoa magic act, the way that it happened in the national championship game a year ago. But it's an all-hands-on-deck scenario. You need every contributing player at his best for that game, and for Fields, that means more playing time. Glad he got some against Auburn on Saturday. Looking forward to hopefully seeing him get some more on against UMass, and it's also great to see Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm playing as well as he is as well. That's Around the Doghouse here on this Monday, brought to you by Pella Window and Door. Of course, you know Pella Window and Door can help you equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. They are family-owned and operated with a branch right here in Georgia, which means it's local service, but it's also backed by a national company. And currently, how about this great offer? You can get 50% off qualifying installations or 0% APR for 48 months. And now that's going to be valid through the end of the year, which is great news. So please make sure you take advantage of that while you still can. Pella also offers the best lifetime warranty with top-of-the-line equipment and unparalleled expertise. You can schedule your free in-home consultation today, and Pella's winning team will take care of everything, including the measurements. There's two ways to get in touch with them. You can find them online at pellasoutheast.us. That website, once again, is pellasoutheast.us, or you can call them at 404-445-2979. That's 404-445-2979 to connect with their Dunwoody showroom. It's Pella Window and Door of Georgia. They are viewed to be the best. It's great to have you on the program today. For more on what happens for Georgia with its big win over Auburn and what could be happening next, let's check in with Chip Towers right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Chip Towers. And, Chip, before we get into the details of what happened on Saturday, first of all, let me say good morning to you. Thank you so much for being with us. But let me also get your thoughts on something I started the show by saying, that I'm a child that came of age during the 80s. I can remember when Georgia-Auburn as a rivalry was as razor-thin as the margin could be. They were an incredibly tough opponent for Georgia every single year. Georgia got its share of wins, too, and back and forth this thing went. Did you ever think we'd be living in an age in which Georgia has completely taken over and dominated the Deep South's oldest rivalry the way that it is now, 11-14, Kirby 3-4 in his 4 meetings against Auburn in 3 years on the job? That's a pretty amazing turnaround in this rivalry given how close this thing had a long history of being, is it not?
Yeah, there was a while there where this thing was headed in the other direction. I think Mark Richt got it righted to a significant degree, and then certainly right now it looks like Kirby Smart has it going well. And let's face it, it's an important rivalry, if for no other reason than where it sits in the schedule. But probably even more important than that is what it means for recruiting. I mean, you and Jeff detailed all those recruits that were in town this weekend, and probably more than any other program, probably more than Alabama and Tennessee and Florida. Georgia goes head-to-head with Auburn all around Atlanta, so it's important that you demonstrate as often as possible superiority in that rivalry and give those recruits reason to want to come to Georgia instead of Auburn. I thought Georgia made a good argument to that effect again Saturday night.
Yeah, I think that's well said. It's amazing the contrast here after Saturday night with Georgia. It is talking about the recruits that were hosted and how many of those that Georgia might sign. With the Auburn side of this, and I'm sure you've seen some of this too, it's this Zapruder-like film that's out there of Gus Malzahn saying something post-game, and Auburn fans trying to decide if he's talking about getting fired or getting fined by the SEC office. It's really amazing at this moment in time. This does seem like programs heading in the opposite direction. Of course, in the SEC, things can change quickly and change back again even faster than that. But at the moment, it's a tough sell for Auburn. And when you have a packed house of 93,000 and Georgia getting another win, ranked in the top 5, it certainly seems like it's providing itself a pretty healthy contrast to some of the turmoil going on at Auburn.
Yeah, it is. And Kirby made reference to this after the game, and I agreed with him. And actually, it was I've had a little bit of banter with readers commenting on my report card because I was pretty tough on Georgia, offensively, defensively, special teams, what have you, in my grading. But at the end of it, and overall, I gave Georgia an A. And so a lot of people were like, well, what can you not add? You know, I mean, you've got B's and C's up there, and then overall you have an A. But I think what I was trying to explain is that's overall, when I do that report card, is a category in and of itself, not an average or summary of everything else that I've discussed. And the point of that was kind of the point that Kirby was making after the game. You were there, Brandon.
Sure.
I mean, it was a great atmosphere. You know, Georgia's fourth quarter light up Stanford Stadium was really good. I mean, you've got national television broadcast. You've got a packed house. It's a cool, crisp night, and just the way the whole proceedings went was impressive, and that's why I thought it was a very impressive night overall. And then again, Brandon, when it comes back to your roots and my roots, I mean, we agree on this because we've seen so many of these games over so many years. Any win over Auburn is a good night, just like any win over Alabama, any win over Florida, any win over Tennessee. Those just have a little bit of a different flavor to them.
Without a doubt, Chip, but that's really well said. Let's talk about what I thought was a interesting storyline after the game. Kirby Smart's explanation for why the fake field goal with Rodrigo Blankenship, who attempts a pass with Isaac Nada. Every Georgia fan I've heard from seems to think that was an attempt to maybe take a little bit of a swipe at Malzahn. The Auburn fans I've heard from certainly feel that way. What did you make of this? Was this a run-up-the-score moment for Kirby against Malzahn? Was it as smart as described, all about strategy and point differential and whatever else? What did you make of that kind of curious moment near the end of this game?
It was curious, and I got to be honest with you, Brandon, and I might be a little bit old school in this regard. I don't know. I'm always interested in hearing feedback, but, I thought it was unnecessary and bordered on unsportsmanlike. I mean, you've got a team. They could have taken a timeout down there if they were still fighting to get back into it, I don't buy that, 3 scores wasn't good enough with 3 minutes left in the game. You already had your backup quarterback in the game. So I don't buy anything that Kirby says on that, quite honestly. And I don't think it's, I do believe in sportsmanship, when you've got an opponent, defeated, and defeat goes beyond score. And you can just tell, right? It's an eye test. I mean, you know what's going on the field, and I just thought it was unnecessary. I don't agree with either one of Georgia's fake field goals this year, strategically or otherwise. So I don't think it's a good time to run that play. I don't care if you've got pass right, wrongs to right, or what have you. That's not what football is all about. And I thought you gave away a really good play. I mean, it's a good play, and it worked. If Rodrigo makes a good pass there, that can be better used, in a tight game against Georgia Tech, or certainly an SEC championship game against Alabama. Now, just the fact that you deployed it gives them something to think about, but it also takes it off the table in my regard. So, I mean, in my opinion. So I just don't I didn't agree with anything about it, and that's just going to be my opinion on it. And it won't be the only thing that maybe Kirby Smart and I disagree upon, but I disagree fairly, heartily on this one.
Well, it's kind of interesting. You bring up 2 separate issues: the sportsmanship issue, which can certainly be debated, and the strategy issue. I guess I'll respond to the strategy part of this, which is there is an element of me that sort of wishes Georgia would be a little less cute from time to time. I think a lot of times you saw on Saturday Georgia went empty backfield a lot in short yardage situations. Now, on the Terry Gowan touchdown, it worked out beautifully. Other times, maybe it did, maybe it didn't. The way in which Fields is being deployed, the second fake field goal here for Rodrigo Blankenship, there is certainly a part of me as a fan that sort of wishes Georgia would just do its bread and butter a little more. I don't know, but so from the strategy standpoint, I guess I kind of agree with you. I guess in a roundabout way, what I'm trying to say is if you want to rub it in Auburn's face, then just run a regular play, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, just gash them, with something. And look, I'm sure we'll get to this eventually, but I mean, Georgia's deep red zone issues are real. This is a real thing, and this is a problem heading into, what you hope is that the college football playoffs, but certainly in that SEC championship game with Alabama. And I know Kirby and his guys don't want to talk about Alabama right now, and that's understandable. All respect to UMass, but with the Georgia Tech game looming, you've got to win that one before anything else after that matters. But, look, this is if I'm not counting right, I think this is the fifth instance that Georgia had first and goal and was unable to score a touchdown. And that, Kirby, you could tell the frustration in his voice in his post-game remarks. That just doesn't hold up to everything that Georgia is supposed to be. You get first and goal, Georgia's supposed to be able to blast it in there, and they have not been able to do that, whether it's been on a left side guard tackle dive or play action or Justin Fields running the ball or jumbo package or fade. They've kind of tried everything, and now it's become a thing, right?
Yeah.
Now it's become psychological. So every time Georgia gets first and goal, all of us are going to go, uh-oh, what's going to happen here? And I don't, I think part of it is the play calling issue, just my opinion. Maybe I'm a little bit old school. I would love to see just one attempt at a toss sweep, and trying to outflank and get a hat-on-hat and see if you can't utilize both speed and your size in there. But what's not working is the quarterback sneak or the running back dive. Those are Flock will tell you, I'm sitting here as we speak charting every play Georgia's called on first and goal this season. And they have scored some, too, that needs to be reminded here. But, but in terms of what we've seen the last three games, Georgia's got some serious issues that it certainly has to work out before it goes against that team in Clemson that they're going to face on December 1st in Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Yeah, a couple things about that, and please don't quote me on this, anyone who's listening right now, because I heard this, I didn't read it, but the SEC Network said on Saturday night that Georgia's like 120-something in the country on goal-to-go situations in terms of scoring. That seems shocking that could be true, but that's what they said on TV on Saturday night. And then the other thing is, listen, Chip, I've never pretended to be an X's and O's expert. I'm not a former player. I'm not a former coach. But here is the one thing that I think we do have to acknowledge about this from an X's and O's standpoint. It is more difficult to score near the goal line. Now, this is not me excuse-making here because Georgia needs to be better, but Georgia does like the power run, and it likes the bunch formations where the wide receivers are a little closer to the ball than maybe they are in some offenses, certainly the Auburn offense, which spreads things out a little bit more. So when you're a power-running bunch formation offense, all of a sudden the defense does have an easier job of it in the goal line situations because the thing that sprang Swift the last 2 weeks, a great downfield block by a wide receiver on a safety, there's no time or room to do that down near the goal line. Now, once again, this is not me saying, and that's the reason why it's okay that Georgia's not scoring during the goal at the goal line. If it wants to beat Alabama, it's going to have to. But from just a straight football strategy standpoint, it's worth pointing out that this is not necessarily just a mental hiccup, that it actually is harder to move the football when you've got less ground for a defense to have to cover. Am I right about that, you think?
Oh, absolutely. Just look at the Atlanta Falcons, on that. They've had issues really going back in the last season. Some teams are better at it than others, certainly, but it's not all mano a mano. It comes down really to physics. And the fact of the matter is nowadays, and this is definitely the case against Kentucky and against Florida and against Auburn, yes, Georgia has big, huge 300-pound-plus linemen, but they're also going against 300-plus-pound defensive linemen. And, all these guys work out. They all lift weights. And, what you have is a stalemate, often when you have 700 pounds going against 700 pounds. But, yeah, that's where I think play calling is part of it. You just got to get smarter. You just got to figure something out. And I don't know what the answer is. I agree. Kirby jokes about it, but he's actually right with it. We just need to score from further out, and it's true. Georgia's great from, 70 yards in. It's just those last five that have been proved problematic. But there is a stat on it, as you alluded to, that SEC stat that Georgia's 120 plus in the nation in goal-to-go situations. That means there's 119 teams at least who are doing a better job of it. So here's what I know about Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs, and everybody knows this. Brandon Adams knows this. I guarantee you there's got to be a team of a dozen support guys that are studying this right now. And I know one thing that he does a lot of is figure out who is really good at this in the nation, whether it be Oklahoma or Hawaii or whoever it is, and you get a hold of that tape and you break down every single play they're calling. And you know what? Football's copycat.
Yeah.
Run a little bit what they're doing.
Yeah.
But here's the bottom line: what Georgia's doing is not working very well, and it is an issue, and it's something that must be addressed in the coming week.
Let me talk about DeAndre Swift here for a moment. We're going to hear Kirby Smart on Swift later on in our show, but our buddy Connor Riley, who does Good Day UGA and the Around the Doghouse written feature at DawgNation.com, he joked with me on Saturday Night, Chip, and said, is it too late for DeAndre Swift to win the Heisman? And I kind of understand where he's coming from on that. Near the beginning of the season, Swift would have been about 25-1 to win the award. He didn't really play that way, probably because of injury for the first few weeks of the season. But boy, he looks like a superstar now. At one point in time, Chip, this Georgia team didn't have enough superstar players or players playing at a superstar level. But Swift has really emerged in that regard here as of late, and I think that's quite a development for Georgia, and I'm sure you agree.
Well, it really is, and it's really becoming evident just how beat up DeAndre Swift is, and I don't know about all the secrecy and stuff, and I have opinions on that. I like transparency in any form, any aspect of my life, or professional or otherwise, but apparently Swift has had surgeries going back to last winter on those that groin situation. He's also had ankle and foot issues this year, and I think clearly we're seeing what a healthy Swift looks like, and he looks a whole lot better than that guy that was running early in the season. But the real story here is what's going on up front and downfield for Georgia,
Yep.
and Kirby makes the point to tell us that every time. But the downfield blocking of Holloman and Nalta on that block in particular, I think against Kentucky it might have been Tyler Simmons and somebody else who is making those blocks. Lamont Gilliard, going back and looking at that play, two blocks. The initial block to steal Swift getting through, but he gets through to the second level and executes the block there as well. And then you have Swift, who two things: breaks an arm tackle, and then secondly has the speed and the vision to know where to go with the ball after that. So, Georgia's definitely got a great situation going on. And not to be lost in this is also the Elijah factor. Not just, but I do believe very much like you had Chubb and Michelle. You got a pounder in there that's sort of softening the defense, and Georgia's run game definitely is, a cumulative phenomenon. It's what they do over the course of a game. By the time you get to the fourth quarter, whether it's Auburn, Kentucky, man, you're just tired of all that contact and all that hitting that you've had to endure that whole game, and that's all it takes is one. And right now, I believe Georgia, is 3 for 3 in the last 3 games of having one of these gash home run plays, and that is just absolutely debilitating to an opponent, regardless if it comes early in the game or late. Those just kill you, and Georgia's in great position right now going forward, with all that working and getting better by the week.
Yeah, Chip, I've got too much respect for Chubb and Michelle to say that Swift and Holyfield are like them. Yeah, they had such great careers, but I will say, as a fan watching this team the last couple of weeks, has certainly felt a lot like 2017, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's look, it's all about philosophy. That's why Kirby's so frustrated down there inside the deep red zone is not being able to take care of business out of that. And we've talked about what the problem is. But we know, you also know that Georgia has the parts and the personnel. And it goes, seeing Terry Godwin get going. This is a great thing for Georgia. You still got the McCole Hardman factor at any time. Riley Ridley, J.J. Holloman, Isaac Nauta. There's a lot of options for Jake Fromm and Jim Chaney and Justin Fields to a lesser degree to deploy. So Georgia's got some problems heading into, but the offense is really not one of them.
Yeah, Chip, really good stuff. Really appreciate your time. We know it's a busy week here. Kirby Smart will speak to the media today. You'll have coverage of that. We'll look forward to reading you here on DawgNation.com a lot. We'll see you on video a couple times here this week, too. So it's going to be a fun time as Georgia makes its stretch run here towards the SEC Championship on the first Saturday in December. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
All right. See you next time.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So what Chip does, he makes a reference there to DeAndre Swift and the secrecy around the injury. Now, Kirby Smart has been pretty tight-lipped. He's even tight-lipped again. We'll hear from him on that coming up in a moment here. But, Swift was not himself at the beginning of the season. We all saw that. And now he is himself to the nth degree here the last couple of weeks. It just seems obvious that he's more healthy. Kirby Smart doesn't want to go down that road. But then there's also the weird thing, and I was obviously at the game and doing our Northside Hospital post-game show. I didn't see this myself, but apparently ESPN says that Swift has surgery on both groins. And I don't know a lot about the surgical procedure and a lot of that kind of stuff, but so apparently he does have that in January. So serious enough that he's dealing with those surgical injuries. And listen, the young man deserves a little bit of privacy for his medical stuff, I guess. There's all kinds of opinions about that, even beyond the world of sports. But it is kind of interesting. And all of a sudden, whatever it was then, what it is now is a very healthy Georgia running back. Before we go around the SEC with our SEC through, let me also take a moment to celebrate Georgia in the classroom here for a moment, because the University of Georgia continues to excel in national rankings, research endeavors, and program offerings. And through our academic achievements, we remain one of the top producers of Rhodes Scholars and are consistently ranked as best public university according to U.S. News and World Report. Certainly, it's been great to see Georgia climb those rankings. We're also a great supporter of research expenditures, seeing our Center for Undergraduate Research Opportunities, for instance, expand faculty-led research for all majors and drawing distinction that thanks to research dollars that have grown 21% over the last 2 years and 35% over the last 3. Our new initiatives attract, hire, and retain world-class researchers and scholars, supporting our commitment to excellence. And our dedication to excelling in the classroom is fueling the momentum of Georgia's most promising people. And our commitment to academic excellence means that UGA students and scholars don't just strive, they also thrive. And now, to learn more about what we're doing in and outside the classroom and to see how you can be a part of it all, go to this website, give.uga.edu. For those of you who are proud of your own diploma from the University of Georgia and proud of the impact that UGA is having around the world, the website once again to go to is give.uga.edu. With that said, let's talk about the SEC here. Let's do our SEC through, and I got to be honest with you. I am very frustrated about the conversation coming out of Alabama right now, not so much about what is being said, but about what isn't being said. Tua Tagovailoa plays again against Mississippi State, takes a big shot from a Mississippi State defender, leaves the game. He's injured. Now, Nick Saban says he could have gone back in the game on Saturday. That's Saban's story. He's sticking to it. Who am I to dispute that? But here's what's being talked about. Was it a dirty, cheap shot on the part of Mississippi State's player? And, on and on we go. But what nobody seems to be saying is, why is Tua Tagovailoa playing so much in games in which Alabama's not even being threatened at all? And I mean last week against LSU included. Remember the touchdown run that Tua Tagovailoa had? He immediately after the run is grabbing his knee. He's holding that. He's clearly hurt at that point in time. I mean, if you look at the evidence we've seen on the field as of late, Tua Tagovailoa can't even make a long run during a game without grabbing for his knee. Can't take a single shot to the knee without being injured and, at least for the moment, not put back in the football game. When is somebody going to ask Nick Saban, why are you playing Tua Tagovailoa so much if he's hurt? Now, it's not going to happen from ESPN because I've said before, Saban's on ESPN more than Stephen A. Smith. I've kind of jokingly called him Stephen A. Saban, and this is where being Stephen A. Saban kind of helps you a little bit. The narrative of, are you playing an injured quarterback, never comes up because Saban's got the media in his back pocket here. Now, you will tune into Paul Feinbaum, and you'll see Paul Feinbaum say that Kirby Smart has completely botched the Georgia quarterback situation. Now, how has Georgia's quarterback situation been botched when Fromm is playing well and Fields is getting experience? How is it fair to say that and not say that Nick Saban is maybe mishandling his own situation when he's continually putting Tua Tagovailoa into situations where clearly he's hurt because he shows signs of being hurt and being signs of being hurt in every one of these games. Now, I won't pretend to be a medical expert here. I don't fully know what's going on with Tagovailoa, but these seem like fair questions to ask. Also, Mississippi State fans upset on the heels of the game on Saturday. A couple questionable calls go against the Bulldogs. Early fumble, a block in the back near the first half. They're both obviously missed calls. I don't think there's any kind of bias here against Mississippi State or in favor of Alabama. But it would behoove the SEC to get their act together. After the Devin White targeting that obviously hurt LSU in the first half last week and this stuff here, the SEC just needs to tighten up a little bit in the officiating in these high-profile games because as it stands right now, it looks pretty sloppy. Let me do two other things here very fast. I got to give credit to Tennessee. That is quite a turnaround that Jeremy Pruitt is a part of at Tennessee right now. When you start fast-forwarding to the offseason, whether Tennessee gets bowl eligible or not, it'd obviously be helpful for the Vols to get to a bowl. But when you start looking at optimistic fan bases this offseason, happy fan bases, Tennessee's group is going to be a lot happier than a lot of fans around the SEC. It's another ranked win for Tennessee after really just hammering Kentucky on Saturday. And all of a sudden you start thinking about, what if they didn't turn the ball over 212 times against Florida? And certainly what would have happened if the South Carolina game could have gone just a little bit different. This is a Tennessee team right now as a program that just seems a lot more competent than it did when Butch Jones was coach. And, boy, you want to talk about bullets being dodged? No Greg Schiano. Look how big of a disaster John Gruden's turned out to be for the Raiders. The Vols right now, and I don't take great pleasure in saying this, but in the hands of Jeremy Pruitt, who's going to have a pretty good run in recruiting, the Vols right now appear to be in pretty good hands here. I think this is going to be a happy fan base. Now, it's obviously a lot tougher to actually start winning the games you really need to win in 2019 and 2020 and beyond. As it stands right now, though, Pruitt's got some stuff in his first season as coach there that he can be proud of. Florida, though, by comparison, is a weird situation. Florida does come back and win again against South Carolina, whose season's just turned out to be a total disaster. Florida does come back and win, but, boy, it seems like things around the swamp are not great right now. It was not a great crowd after really being a bad crowd for the Missouri game a week ago. Boos for the quarterback, Felipe Franks, who at one point in time shushed the crowd. We've talked about lip reading in this show a couple times already. There were some lip readers who saw some of the things that Frank said, and maybe it was a pretty distasteful message for Gator Nation. It's a weird time to be a Florida fan. As it turns out, Dan Mullen's record can end up still being pretty good. I mean, they can get to like 9-3, right, which is not a bad record for a first-year coach and a huge improvement over where it was from a season ago. But it doesn't seem like Florida fans are in too good of a mood right now, which will probably put Georgia fans in actually a pretty good mood. And with that said, we'll make that your SEC through. And now here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, I want to turn our attention back to the Georgia Bulldogs. And I want to talk about DeAndre Swift. In fact, I actually want to award DeAndre Swift as our R.S. Andrews Cool Under Pressure Performer of the Week. I just think that what Swift has done as of late is thrilling. And I said this to Chip, you heard this a moment ago, that it would be unfair to say, and Swift and Holyfield right now are just like Chubb and Michelle a year ago. Y'all, Chubb and Michelle are all-time greats. Georgia doesn't retire numbers anymore with good reason. But in terms of really remembering guys and putting them in the most rarefied category of sacred careers, the tandem of Chubb and Michelle's got to be there. So it'd be too quick to say, and Swift and Holyfield are just like them. Over the last couple of games, though, they have certainly remind you of what Georgia had with that tandem of running backs a year ago. And Swift emerging as a star is happening at the perfect time for Georgia. He does seemingly appear healthier now than he did back then. Kirby Smart disputes that just a little bit, but no doubt he's enjoying the emergence of the Georgia running game and all the various elements of the offense that are making that possible.
Well, he was good early in the year. I mean, I don't know why people don't think he wasn't good early in the year. He didn't get probably as many opportunities early in the year as he's getting now. He was dinged up some early, and he also has got an offensive line that's blocking their tail off. I mean, at the end of the day, DeAndre's a really electric, explosive runner. He's really good out of the backfield catching the ball. But J.J. Holloman and Solomon Kinley and Miko Hartman's a lot of good blocks that sprung a 30-yard play to a whatever it was, 60 or 70-yard play. And I think when you've got that, it helps you as a runner. And DeAndre would be the first to admit that.
How about DeAndre Swift's stat line for the day? 17 carries, 186 yards, a touchdown. He averages 10.9 yards a carry. He also gives you 4 catches for 43 yards, an amazing performance for Swift. And Kirby's right, the way that the wide receivers, J.J. Holloman included, who's just so good at kind of going out there and doing those crackback blocks on defensive backs. It's one of the reasons why it really is easier for Georgia to score on long fields, because wide receivers are capable of doing those kinds of things. But I've been telling you now for the last couple of weeks that as a Georgia fan, I'm not scared of Alabama. I'm also not going to promise you that Georgia's going to win that game, but I'm not scared. One of the reasons why I'm not scared is because I've always been of the belief that Georgia would get better as the season goes along. Folks, that is happening. Now, maybe it's not enough. Maybe the improvements that are occurring won't fully allow Georgia to surpass this behemoth in Alabama at the end of the season. But look at DeAndre Swift, and you need to look no further to see evidence of just how much better this team is in November than it was in September and October. DeAndre Swift is our R.S. Andrews Cool Under Pressure Performer of the Week. And as I woke up around my house in North Atlanta, Georgia today, I was noticing some of those frosty mornings. Well, frosty mornings can put a smile on your face when you make the call to get an R.S. Andrews furnace checkup. They are the best in the industry when it comes to that, and it's just $99. Their trained techs are clean and on time, and they drive beyond ordinary furnace checkups. R.S. Andrews inspects your heat exchanger for leaks. It checks your filters, your flue, your vents, and even more. And you're going to get your system back to factory fresh specs, and it's all just $99. So check them out online at rsandrews.com today. All right, we will wrap up here with a couple of things. First of all, how quickly did this show fly by? It's amazing. We could have done 15 hours today, I believe. Before we do our Gatorator updater, let me also say one thing. I wanted to talk more about this, just didn't have time. I'm sure we'll do this more in the week. Tyson Campbell does take a seat on the bench for a little bit on Saturday, and Eric Stokes gets some time in place of him. Stokes makes the great play down. I think it's the third down play down near the goal line for Auburn. A nice moment for Stokes. If you're asking me, has my opinion on Tyson Campbell changed whatsoever? No, it has not. I'm glad to see Stokes get in the game. I'm glad to see a teaching moment. Sometimes you learn by watching. I'm glad to see that for Tyson Campbell. But my tune on Campbell's not changing whatsoever. 2019, 2020, this is a lockdown cornerback for Georgia. I'm glad that he's gotten the experience he's gotten, even if it hasn't always been perfect. Let me also say Georgia wins one rivalry game. We'll also celebrate another 744 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow here on DawgNation Daily. And as I said a moment ago, how quickly does this show go by today? Unbelievable. Fast. Hopefully we touched on it all. Let me also say one thing before we kind of get into the comments heavily here, because I do want to give a lot of you a chance to reflect and say anything you want to say from today's show. When it comes to the issues with the goal line, I was lucky enough last year for the Rose Bowl. I got a chance to stand right down there on the field at the goal line on the side of the field where the overtime was unfolding at the Rose Bowl. And first of all, what a great experience that was. I got to do the same thing for the national championship game. That wasn't quite as much fun, but the Rose Bowl was fantastic. And in addition to like being really close to a moment that I'll remember forever, it's also a learning experience. I just think you learn a lot about football when you watch it up close. And you really do see, take the Oklahoma offense, for instance. You know, Georgia's secondary last year, I don't believe, was one of the strengths of the team. But when you put Baker Mayfield, the Heisman Trophy, on a short field, all of a sudden it's a lot more difficult for Mayfield to exploit that Georgia secondary. He can do it all day long at midfield, but when you get into the short field near the end of the game, that becomes a lot more difficult to do. And I think that's really fascinating. I always thought that red zone stats and things of that nature, for the most part, was just some sort of random thing that people make a big deal about, sort of like scoring with men on base in baseball. I always thought that was, you know, batting average with runners in scoring position. I just always thought that was just some, random set of data that we fixate on that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But when you really watch red zone football, when the ball is snapped from the 25 and in, or I guess the red zone being defined as the 20 and in, when you watch the game from that level, you realize how much easier it is to play well defensively and how much harder it is to score offensively. It doesn't take the responsibility off Georgia to get better, but this is more than just a mental hiccup of, Georgia at the red zone. They're up in their own head about the red zone. It is a little tougher, especially for Georgia, which does like to crowd the middle of the field when it snaps the football. I don't really quite know what you do with that, and obviously, there are plenty of people who know more about the X's and O's than I do. But that is the one thought that I have when I watch this unfold is that Georgia, is built to score from longer football fields and is built to do things a little bit differently. Doesn't take the responsibility away here. Georgia's got to get better at that aspect of the game because every point's going to matter against Alabama. You cannot get 3 when you could have gotten 6. You can't do that against Alabama. But let's not pretend that it isn't a little bit more difficult. And with that said, we'll get some comments. Miriam Martin Corbin says, I hope you're wrong. I hate Tennessee. And I guess I hope I'm wrong too. But, as Georgia is kind of just running away with the SEC East and really outpacing everyone in the SEC with the exception of Alabama, I guess I am a little bit fascinated because I always joke about being an SEC homer. I just really, really like the SEC. I'm fascinated by the whole deal. Not just Georgia winning its games, but how the rest of the league operates and the trends within the league. I just am obsessed with that. I care about the SEC and SEC football way more than I care about any other sporting event. It's amazing. As I get older, that becomes even more true. It's always been true, but it even occupies an even more outsized portion of my brain the older that I get. And so I'm fascinated with who's on the rise and who's on the decline. And when I say that Jeremy Pruitt's kind of on the rise at Tennessee. Please understand what I mean by that. I don't necessarily mean that next year is going to be even better and the year beyond that's going to be even better. A lot of these things have a way of not quite materializing. The intervals of progression don't quite unfold the way you think they're going to. So there's a chance that I end up being kind of wrong, or the evidence that exists now about Tennessee ends up not fully materializing the way that it looks. I just think that we were in sort of a situation last year where almost every SEC fan base was kind of in a bad mood. Almost every SEC fan base, beyond the Georgias and the Alabamas, had some reasons to be doubting or concerned about their program. You're going to hear a little crowing coming from Tennessee this offseason. Now, maybe it ends up being all, for nothing, but you're going to hear a little crowing coming from them. Josh Strickland says no reason to struggle at the 5-yard line. So maybe my explanation for why I think it's happening a minute ago didn't quite work for you, which is fine. But from my standpoint, I would say there's, maybe some reason, although it may not be enough of a reason. Matt Rukavina says, I'm going to be honest, I was dissatisfied with the 17-point win. And, Matt, I understand where that's coming from, and that's part of the reason why I started the show the way that I did. Because when it comes to being a Georgia fan here, and I don't want to be real philosophical about this. I feel like I did this on the show a few days ago, but I don't want to go down this road again. But there's certain pieces of information you can grab. If you want to fixate on the weird way that Georgia used Fromm and Fields and where Justin Fields is a player right now, if you want to fixate on that, there's enough data for you to grab onto that you can fixate on that if you want to. If you want to fixate on the issues of the red zone and how I heard the word embarrassment thrown around. I heard a lot of that kind of stuff. If you want to fixate on that, you certainly can. If you want to fixate on, why Georgia only won by 17 points when they could have won by 27 points or 30 points, you can fixate on that too. You can fixate on that. I certainly think a lot of those things I just brought up are issues worth discussing. And listen, I get greedy just like anybody else does. But I really do remember when beating Auburn was like the biggest deal in the world. And there was an aspect of Saturday, as great as the atmosphere was, and I thought it was great, as loud as the crowd got, and at times I thought it got really loud. There was an aspect of Saturday that was just a little bit weird, that Georgia was essentially playing out the string against one of its most hated rivals, and to many of you, the most hated rival. Even though I make a big deal about Florida, there are a lot of you that hate Auburn more than any other team that Georgia plays. And here's, Georgia playing, Auburn in this sort of lame duck portion of the schedule. So there was an aspect of Saturday that was really weird. This was not an Auburn team that was ultimately good enough to beat Georgia, and there was only debate of, is it good enough to keep it close? As it turns out, it wasn't, and then it became, well, how many points is going to be enough for Georgia fans? I just think that it's important for me, the best that I possibly can, to maintain some context here of, as Chip Towers mentioned a moment ago, beating Auburn continues to be a really big deal. Even when it doesn't quite feel like a big deal, beating Auburn is a big deal. At one point in time, we'll look back on this from the viewpoint of history and say, wow, Gus Malzahn in 2013 looked like he might be building something. I actually wrote about this on Friday at DawgNation.com, that back in 2013, Malzahn seemed like the next great genius in coaching. And then it kind of falters for him, and then Kirby Smart comes in a couple years beyond that, and all of a sudden it's Kirby Smart actually sliding Malzahn off the mantle of the SEC coach most likely to truly threaten Nick Saban in Alabama. This has happened so quickly that it almost seemed like it was just destined to occur from the beginning. That's not necessarily the way it was. It's actually been a pretty significant accomplishment for Georgia to wrest this rivalry away from Auburn the way that it has, and I guess I'm going to take some time to celebrate that. Santiago Dion asked an interesting question. Santiago says, BA, how long should we play Fromm to protect him from injury against UMass? I think that's an interesting question. In general, I don't want to see Georgia coach as a way of protecting against injury, both on the field during games and certainly at practice. Remember, there was some criticism of Zamir White's injury when it occurred at the beginning of the season. I was devastated by the injury, but I never criticized Georgia for practicing hard, practicing White hard there. I would never criticize that. I want to play hard. Football is a violent, competitive sport. There's a reason why you have a roster filled with 85 guys. You're going to need them at a certain point. So I wouldn't go into the game on Saturday in terms of being too worried about Fromm getting hurt. Now, it's going to be awful if he were to get hurt, but I wouldn't go in there with that mindset because there's a certain aspect of that you can't really control. And if you don't play him very much, I think that you also run the risk of, there's still some timing issues that you'd love to see really, really solidify between Fromm and Holloman, who's emerging. Saturday was a great day for Terry Godwin. That's so great to see. You got a chance to talk to Mrs. Godwin, Terry's mom, again on Saturday. She was thrilled by the way that her son played, no doubt. It's been really fun to see the way that he stepped in there and establishing that rapport with these receivers. I'll include Isaac Nana, the tight end, in that too. When it comes to beating Alabama, you're going to need some of that. Alabama, the one area in which they might be vulnerable is when it comes to that secondary, throwing the football. That was true early in the year. They've been better the last few weeks, but I think you want Fromm to be at his sharpest, at his best. I think you stay sharp by playing. However, Santiago, with that said, I do think it's also a great game to get more extended playing time for Justin Fields. We saw him a lot against overmatched opponents in September. How much has he grown by November? That could be fun to watch, right? Now, the overall stats in those games are pretty good, so maybe the eye test, Fields won't look any different on Saturday. But it's a chance for the coaching staff, who knows more than just the overall surface level look. They can look a little bit more deeper into his performance. An extended look for Fields on Saturday, for him to demonstrate to these coaches how much he's improved, I think that'd be great. I think it's some version of Fromm and Fields that's going to be required to beat Alabama. A lot of Fromm, a little of Fields, probably, but some of both. So that'll be fun to think about. Al Birchfield says, I saw some criticism of Kirby Smart about having White cover a punt. Maybe DawgNation reported it, but really? Yeah, so there were some fans who were saying, oh, why do you get this guy out there, and, why this and why that? For me, Al, that's never an issue. I think you practice the way you play, and I want that to be hard. So practice hard, play hard, and let's let the chips fall where they may. It's not necessarily, next man up all the time, because there is going to be a drop-off at some positions. But overall, championships are won by, building the deepest and best roster. Ken Blankenship, our buddy, checks in to say there were so many recruits at this game. It was crazy. Yeah, Ken, it really was. I was down there on the field early, and, for the most part, they try to keep the media and the recruits separated before the game, but I had a chance to see a few of these guys, and it's always fun. I think even beyond, listen, y'all know, I talk about this stuff enough. You know what the real story is, that there is always going to be a fascination with me about, are these guys coming to Georgia, and is there some sort of clue during the game that they might be coming to Georgia? I'm not going to pretend that's not the case. But as kind of an older guy now, there's also this thing of, I like to watch them take all this experience in, whether they ultimately go to Georgia or not. I do love, how, like, when you go to a big city, when I go to a New York or Chicago, I'm not the kind of guy that, travels so much that the big, tall buildings ever stop being amazing to me. I look like a tourist when I'm walking around these big cities. My head's always up. I'm always just looking at how phenomenal the skyline looks. And there's an element of that with a lot of the recruits as well. You can sort of tell who's, kind of got a little too cool for school. They're not really looking up and looking around all that much. And yet, for the most part, there's still a pretty good vibe among recruits of, wow, this is a big stadium. Look at all these fans, and, look at all this kind of stuff. And I do love the way they take all that in, because for the most part, even these guys who've played games on television and have been to the big camps and have kind of done all of that, they still haven't really played in a stadium this big, and they haven't played in an environment like this. They know they're about to. They know that it's just a few months away, and it's a matter of deciding which big stadium and proud program do they want to go play for. But they are soaking it in, wondering what's it really going to be like when I'm down there on that field playing in these games. Because the noise, the way that these big stadiums surround the field, you can't match that in high school football, and you don't get that in the Under Armour All-American game where there are 45 people in the stands and it's raining in Orlando. You just don't get that. But you do get that, for obviously a big SEC game like this. And so, as Ken was saying, watching them watch all of this is really something. Really something. Chris Martell says, speaking of Mr. Blankenship, hot ride for quarterback against UMass. I did get a funny tweet. I should put this on the show. Somebody had taken a perfect picture of Blankenship throwing the ball. And like he's got pretty good form. This particular, other than the fact that he's wearing 98, he looks like a quarterback here. Somebody said something defective. I guess you can add one more name to the quarterback controversy. I don't know who took the picture, but somebody sent the picture to me, and it was really funny. Really funny. Vernon Luzier, and I'm going to go to YouTube after this, says wishes Trent Thompson would have stayed. Yeah, look, Georgia could have really used Thompson. I think Thompson's going to have used more time in Georgia. I just hate the way that system requires you to make that choice. I do. It's tough. And some Georgia guys at the end of the season are going to face that same thing. And, the coaches, and this is where, even with all due respect to Kirby Smart, the coaches, when they talk about this kind of stuff, they talk about it from the standpoint of what benefits the program. They just can't help themselves. It's just in their DNA. So Saban and Kirby and these guys are going to say, well, if you're not going to be a first-round pick, you got to stay in school. But for a lot of these guys, it's not that simple. For a lot of these guys, even the risk of making an NFL team is worth it because of the paycheck that you might get. It's not the $20 million guaranteed. I know the guaranteed money's less than what it used to be, but for the most part, you're talking about a first-round pick. You still got really strong guaranteed money coming there. Kirby and Saban, these guys would say, well, of course you take that, but if you're not going to get that, you should come back to school. Well, that's it's easy to say when it's not your money and it's not your life that's being changed by it. So Thompson, made a risk. He betted on himself, and the bet doesn't play out there. I hate it for him, and I miss him at Georgia, and it would have helped him and Georgia both to be back here this year. Georgia, for what it's worth, has done a pretty good job of replacing him, but there's no doubt that's a decision I'm sure Thompson would like to have back. I know that we're about to get into a scenario where I guess the NBA draft, the proposal is that if you leave, you can come back to school, right? Now, I don't know that college would ever do that because I think these college coaches like having control over the system a little bit more, but that would certainly be more fair. And Crow King 123 on YouTube kind of said the same thing. Georgia Peach says, Gus is lip read, LOL. What I really should have done is, because, on the regular show, the regular DawgNation Daily broadcast, I try not to do anything on the show that only translates to video. But for these video comments, I should have just played this lip read thing. It is so funny. Now, I really don't think he's saying they better not fire me. And for those of you who don't know, there's a moment which Malzahn is captured on CBS during the game, and he says one of two things, at least seemingly one of two things. He says they either better not fire me or they better not fine me. I sort of think he says they better not fine me. But how funny would it be if he said they better not fire me? Because this morose look on his face is really something. And, to go back to the fake field goal thing again, y'all, I'm not the least bit scandalized if Kirby doesn't like Malzahn and wanted to show it. I just don't care. I mean, I'm sure that Malzahn would do the same thing to Kirby. And really, that's what rivalries are kind of supposed to be. These guys aren't, look, some of the stuff that happens in politics, that's nasty and that's gross. But, trying to score an extra touchdown when there's still 3 minutes to go in a game, that's not the kind of thing that I'm going to get too worked up and worried about. And, of course, if it happened the other way around, you better believe we'd be on here talking about, revenge and things like that. But, whatever. That's just the way life goes. This is SEC football. This is fun, and rivalries make it fun. And, there's always an aspect of some of this kind of stuff that kind of is going to veer in the territory of being pro wrestling, and this may be some of that a little bit too. But on a more serious note, speaking of lip reading, there was the moment in which some of you have sent this to me where Kirby Smart could be caught with a lip reading moment at the end of the game against Florida. And on a family-centered, show, family-friendly content, I can't even begin to describe what Smart looked to be saying about Florida and its coaching staff led by Dan Mullen and Todd Grantham. But I think it's safe to say that based on the evidence of the last few weeks, that Georgia's got itself a coach that he has a healthy vigor for rivalry games against both Florida and Auburn. I think you can probably add Georgia Tech into that category a little bit too. Kirby last year, he finally acknowledged the notion of a revenge tour after Georgia had beaten Georgia Tech. So I think you may add Tech in that category too. When I was a kid, Georgia's last 3 games every single year were Florida, Auburn, Georgia Tech, Florida, Auburn, Georgia Tech, Florida, Auburn, Georgia Tech. We don't talk much about Tech on the show, but that was always the traditional rivalry to end the season. Those were, I think, by anyone's estimation, Georgia's 3 biggest rivals, and I think you've got a little bit of evidence here to suggest that Kirby's got his game face on for all 3 of those. That's good news, I believe. Pine Saw Lemon Sen says, let's just call it a nice edge. That's very well said, Pine Saw. Kirby's got himself a nice little edge for Florida, for Auburn, and Georgia Tech, and as the coach of Georgia, that ain't such a bad thing. It's almost as if he's a Georgia alumnus, isn't it? Oh, how about this? This is just breaking. This comes from the Clemson football account. How about this, y'all? Now, this is a long time from now, but this is good times. Clemson and Georgia, in addition to playing in the Chick-fil-A kickoff in 2024, I believe, it's 2029 and 2030. 2020. Let me get this out, and then I'll read this. 2029, 2030, home and home for Georgia and Clemson. That's a good time. This is coming fast and furious. Greg McGarity is busy. So Georgia's got Clemson coming in 29 and 2030. And according to Brett McMurphy, how about Georgia going to Austin in 2028 at Texas, and then Texas returning the favor in 2029? That is unbelievable. Home and homes just scheduled by Georgia with Clemson and Texas. That is unbelievable. Still on the docket, unless the SEC changes things, is also a home and home around that same time with UCLA, right? Georgia's got a UCLA, 25 and 26. So Georgia, who's got Notre Dame coming in next year, will have UCLA, Clemson, Texas all coming up. The Clemson, the Texas just signed. 29 and 20 this is hard to say. 2029 and 2030, those years with Clemson, and the 2 years prior to that, 2028, 2029, when it comes to Georgia and Texas. How about that? Mike D says, hopefully I'm still alive. I know that seems like a long time from now, but this is the only way you get this stuff scheduled. You gotta get it scheduled to have the games. You can't do it 1 year out. You got to do it several years in the future, and this is as good as it gets. This is as good as it gets. K9 Blue says, love what we're doing with scheduling. Yeah, for me, this is the best of both worlds. Because this is another one of those issues, like a lot of the things that face Georgia, including the Georgia-Florida thing, the black jerseys, all those issues that we all love to debate during this time of the show. This is one of those things where I think there's, a fair argument on both sides, kind of a majority rule situation. And the question I've posed to many of you in the past was, would you rather, with a big-time non-conference game, play a regional rival like Clemson or a big national opponent like Notre Dame? Well, what Georgia said is, how about both? How about go to Texas, get out of the region? How about play Clemson, which is, listen, if these two programs continue down the same trajectory, that's a massive, massive game. This is a great way to do both here, and credit to Georgia. I know, to bring up kind of a tired subject, I know that Georgia Athletic Director Greg McGarity is not always the favorite of many of yours, but I think many of you need to give him credit for this, because this is a great job. And, by the way, credit to Kirby Smart here, too, because Smart has used his podium as the Georgia coach to say, these are the kind of games we should be playing. Y'all, it wasn't that long ago that Georgia coaches, or not just Georgia coaches, college football coaches in general, wanted to play the easiest games they could get away with. I mean, that's been a national phenomenon of, hey, we want to have guaranteed wins in non-conference games, and let's try to keep the conference schedule at 8 so that it doesn't get too tough with the extra conference game. That hurts my win-loss record over the course of time. That's what some coaches used to say. Kirby Smart's part of this new generation of coaches that say, no, when you get the best program, when you get the most talent, you want to play the toughest games because you're the kind of program, if everyone's doing that, that's going to emerge the best out of those kinds of scenarios. You are utilizing your advantage to your advantage, and credit to Georgia here for doing that. That's really exciting, really exciting. Let me go over to Facebook, get a few more comments here as well. I think that's thrilling. Keith Finley says, Dabo's going to be Bama's coach by then. Listen, obviously a lot can change over the course of that time, and maybe that is indeed the case, that Dabo's at Alabama by then. But listen, Georgia Clemson's going to be big whatever year it's played in. And going to Austin, playing Texas, that's phenomenal, phenomenal. It could be that Georgia and Texas play each other before Texas and Texas A&M play each other. And certainly by the time 2030 rolls around, Georgia will have played Texas as much as it's played Texas A&M, I guess, which is just really weird. That's really fantastic. Scott Harris says, DawgNation invasion to Austin. You better believe that we'll already be talking about that. A little Franklin's barbecue, a little everything else. Yeah, that is going to be outstanding. Walter Smithendorf says in 2044, Georgia's also announced that its artificial intelligence team is going to play Ohio State's artificial intelligence teams. Yeah, but listen, by the future, who knows what's going on here? But that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Michael Hoffman says it would also be fun to play TCU. That would be interesting. Curtis Cruz says, this just in, let's worry about the here and now. Come on, Curtis. That's not fair. Can we have a little bit of fun? I mean, can we have just a little bit of fun here? Jeff Hensley says, how about some Own the East t-shirt? So I wanted to do an Own the East ... again t-shirt. I think we are going to do another cool t-shirt here coming up, but it may not quite be that one. But that's what we're going to do. Scott Harris says, how about Austin City Limits in all red? Yeah, Scott, that's going to be fantastic. Nick Lurch says BA is going to be in a walker by then. Come on. I ain't that old. And plus, you know, I'm a robot. Like, you know, I don't, my hair keeps getting grayer, but, you know, my energy level doesn't wane. You better believe I'm not going to be in a walker in 2028 or 2029. That's not nice. Clint Turner, now this is probably a fair point. By then, the quarterbacks will probably be walking around in those bubble suits, like the thing you see when you go to the fair, where, like, you know, like that's probably about, that probably is about true. Drew Miller says, breaking news in 2019, Brandon Adams will still be a Gator hater. Drew, that's also true. That's also true. Vernon Luzier says, what's our offensive line injury status? Very concerned. Well, you know, you got to give a lot of credit for the way that Lamont Gilliard bounced back to play on Saturday. That is a tough customer right there. That is a street fighter. Georgia's got a handful of those interior offensive linemen who were just like, you know, brawlers. And Gilliard's just a brawler. So, you know, Cleveland maybe not fully healthy yet. I think more it's an issue of like him just dusting off the cobwebs maybe, as opposed to the injury situation, although the injury that he dealt with is a pretty significant one. Georgia's going to use these next couple of weeks to get those guys healthy. I think, you know, the one point that I keep coming back to is that Georgia is in a position to deal with these injuries now in a way that it would not have been able to in 2017. This is a deeper offensive line. They can withstand them. But I do think you want that best five against Alabama. And for me, with all due respect, that may be Thomas at left tackle, of course, maybe Mays at left guard, healthy Gilliard in the center, hopefully Cleveland back at that right guard spot, and then Isaiah Wilson blocking the sun there on that right side of the tackle position. That's what I hope for. John William Adams says, Ben Cleveland just needs more Red Bull and Skol. I think, John, to be fair here, I believe that Mr. Cleveland has said his brand of choice is Copenhagen. Now, we don't endorse nor condone smokeless tobacco, but I believe, according to Mr. Cleveland's Instagram account, it's Copenhagen and not Skol, although I may have that one wrong. Yeah, Clint Turner says Copenhagen the same way. Travis Goff says, you never know. Texas might actually be in the SEC by then. Yeah, you maybe so. Joe Rush says Mays over Kinley. It's a tough call for me, Joe, but I do believe, I think that when Mays is healthy, he's one of Georgia's best five, and it's a debate worth having. And you know, Kinley should get credit for what he's been able to do here, but I do believe Mays right now is one of Georgia's best five. Let me get some YouTubes. Tram Dickerson says, BA, can you imagine calling the game on a long Swift run? Oh, listen, I just love the way that Swift put these games on ice. He did it for the SEC championship game a year ago. He did it, you know, the last two Saturdays for Georgia. I can only imagine how much fun that must be. Only imagine. Ninja the Noob says he's still got a 10-page paper to write today. These profs act like I'm supposed to earn this degree or something. So the Ninja's trying to be creative in how he gets his work done. We appreciate those of you that take a break here to come hang out with us. It's always a lot of fun. K9 Blues, not to change the subject, but I will bring this up. He says Georgia Tech beating Miami was still a shock to me, as Rick knows the offense. Yeah, I mean, I take no great pleasure in what's happening to Miami with Richt, but wow, they are a total mess. And I do think it's somewhat ironic the week that there was some debate about what color uniforms Georgia should wear, Miami responds to Tech's wide out. The game's in Atlanta and Tech's whiting it out. Is that right? They go all white, and Miami responds by wearing all black, and then they lost to Georgia Tech. I mean, that is rough going right there. Rough going. Diedrich Frazier says Georgia will be a lot healthier heading into the Alabama game. I hope so. And I meant what I said about Tua Tagovailoa, too. Nick Saban gets such a free pass here. Let's watch what happens with Tagovailoa at the end of the season. Either I'm wrong and injury's no big deal, or maybe at the end of the season, all of a sudden there's, some sort of discussion about some sort of, process for recovery, which I'm sure will go fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. But this is a future very high NFL draft pick in all likelihood. Nick Saban maybe doesn't always have the most sterling history when it comes to some of this kind of stuff. I think it's very interesting. Georgia Sunshine says, my Miami fan associates, by the way, I love that word, associates, still hate me for laughing at the U signing up for our problem. Yeah, as long as it doesn't interfere with what Georgia's trying to do, I would root for Rick to have some success. But a lot of what Miami is dealing with is some of the stuff that Georgia fans, I think, do have memories of. And I guess really my irritation with the situation is not an anti-Rick thing, but there was this media narrative of, well, Rick has gone to Miami, and now he's energized, and he's ready to revolutionize that program. And when Georgia's losing some games, and initially in 2016, looked like Miami had gotten the better deal, and there was a lot of, Georgia, you should wanted to fire Mark Richt now, and unrealistic fan expectations, blah 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 blah. I think we all see now how that's all played itself out, but it's really the media narrative that comes out of that aggravates me more so than anything associated with Mark Richt. Hell Rel says, don't do Richt like that, guys. He brought us the same thing Kirby Smart did in an SEC championship. Although Kirby birthed us into a title game, but we didn't win. So I at least a little bit kind of agree with Hell Rel. Now, I do believe that Kirby right now is on a better trajectory than Richt ever appeared to be. The roster's in just better shape. Kirby's dominating SEC teams in a way that Richt, for the most part, didn't do. Richt won games. Kirby's dominating them. But the overall point that Hell brings up there is a really good one. That Richt should always be a revered figure at Georgia. Y'all, we had an SEC championship game in Atlanta for a long time, and Georgia didn't sniff it, did not darken its doors, would not enter without a ticket. And Richt, in his second year, got Georgia to the game. What an unbelievable day that was in December of 2002 when Georgia beat Arkansas, won the SEC championship. To come back and do the same thing again in 2005, if there had been a playoff in 2007, Georgia would have deserved to have been in it, I believe. I think that I think that Richt has a revered place in Georgia history. I don't really know what that is. I don't know if it's statues. Sometimes y'all get upset with me for talking about statues, but Richt got to get something in Georgia. He ought to have some sort of place in history. And if Kirby Smart goes on to win 15 national championships, I'll still appreciate the Richt years for what they were. An important next step to get Georgia where it is now, because Kirby having the success that he's enjoying now has been made easier by some of the success that Richt had at Georgia. So from that standpoint, I'll always have a great affection for Richt. Georgia Jeff says, any chance we recruit some big bullies on the defensive line? So we talked earlier about how Gilliard and some of those guys are just street fighters. They're just maulers. I think that defensive line's coming along okay right now, and they've also got a pretty good-looking crop of guys coming in. Bill Norton's nasty. Trayvon Walker's just a phenomenal athlete for defensive line. He's a good basketball player. You talk about what makes defensive line different than offensive line. We talk about this sometimes. The fact that Trayvon Walker's going to play like 3 technique in the SEC, but you watch him on the basketball floor, he gets up off the ground. This is a great shot blocker in basketball, a really athletic guy. And so, yeah, you're going to have those maulers, but you're also going to have these guys that can move around a little bit. Walker's a great example of that. I'm really interested to see what Trayvon does in college. All right, I guess we should probably get off the air. Let me get some YouTube comments. We'll get ready to go. Diedrich Frazier says, I love Richt, but he got several $1 million. He's cool. I want a championship before I die. And Diedrich, I get that. And that's why I think that Georgia is in a better position now than it was. But I have fond memories of the Richt years, but I understand your thought of the present. Georgia would seem to be in better hands with Kirby Smart, and I can't dispute that. I also agree with P-Man127, who says Richt was a good coach, but towards the end he wasn't the coach that he once was. Maybe the coordinators had a little bit more influence. That's probably true as well. Crow King 123 with an important reminder. Georgia Tech's playing better, he says. That's a good thing. We need to keep Paul Johnson there so we don't have to compete with them for recruits. I mean, Tech is playing a little bit better. You know, statistically speaking, offensively, they've actually had a really good year. I don't watch much of Tech, so I don't really know much about what they're doing. I know they had a little bit of a quarterback controversy at one point in time. I guess that settled down, but offensively they've played pretty well. So we shall see. We shall see. Dapper Dan reminding us of the fish fry comment that Paul Johnson once made famous about having bigger fish to fry than just beating Georgia. And, you know, look, I don't want to get this into a Georgia Tech thing because Georgia's got, to worry about the Minutemen of UMass before it gets to Georgia Tech. But I've always felt like one of Johnson's greatest disservices to his own fans is the way in which he doesn't embrace the Georgia rivalry. And listen, Georgia's going to be Tech no matter what most of the time, and Tech fans are going to be ornery about that no matter what most of the time. As a coach, you can't really downplay that successfully. It's always going to be the elephant in the room. But the fact that he's never really kind of full-throatedly embraced that, only in kind of a passive-aggressive way, but if I was a Tech fan, that would drive me crazy. It would absolutely drive me crazy. Anyway, we got to get ready to go. I guess we have another thing coming up here for our studio. So let me get ready to wrap this up and say thank you all for being with us. We'll have DN90 later on. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. If you're just joining us in the last couple of minutes, the big news, Georgia, or at least reportedly, Clemson reports this. Brett McMurphy reports this, at least based on what I've seen. Everybody's reporting it now. Georgia's confirmed it. Georgia has confirmed. Home and Homes sign, or Homes and Home? Either way, Georgia's going to Texas. Texas will return the favor in 2028 and 2029. And then the same thing with Clemson in 2029 and 2030. Love these home and home deals. And Georgia's got two big high-profile ones coming up in the next decade. That's going to be a lot of fun. We'll still be here for it, hopefully, and we'll appreciate you being here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily presented by Marco's Pizza. Y'all have a great day.